Ashreinu. Thank everybody for being here. Thank you guys so much for coming and joining us. It's an incredibly special thing, like beyond special. To have an opportunity to experience Rabbi Nachman's primary sefer, Likutei Moharan, daily, morning. And sometimes when you have, we're using Hakdamah, so sometimes when you have a weekly shir, so you can cover however much ground you can cover. But a daily shir is something completely different. It's something where you're living with the tzaddik, and you are. Sorry, if everybody could just mute as they join the chat. I don't have a way of doing that from my end. Thank you. Unless it's this, unless that. Is that what that is? I muted myself. Okay, so we're going to have to figure this out. This might not be the best way to do it. Okay. So really to begin our day every single morning as a chabura, learning together, waking up early with tremendous mesiras nefesh, it's difficult. And to get together, to journey along with the tzaddik is already an absolutely life-changing thing. You know, just the fact that we make a commitment to get up early in the morning, which memela means that you have to be conscious of going to sleep a little bit earlier at night, which memela means it impacts your whole entire life. You know, and I think last night for me, as we were leaving from a nightly Likutei Moharan Chabura B'Iyon that we have with some guys, it was clear to me that this is like my life is different from today. You know, I think any kind of learning, good morning, any kind of learning is different when a person does it daily, especially if a person wakes up early to do the learning. But to make a commitment to learn this sefer means that my whole life right now revolves around this tzaddik and his teaching and his path and his promise that anybody who holds on to his hand, Rabbi Nachman said, walk with me and I'll take you, he said, on a new path that's really the very old path. That all of our avos and imos and all of our tzaddikim and tanoim, amoraim, rishonim walked, that had gotten lost somewhere along the way. Rabbi Nachman wanted to return that fire, to return that vision, that clarity, that yearning, that hope. He wanted to give us back Hashem, you know, plainly speaking. So before we jump into the Hakdamah, I'm just going to speak a little bit more broadly. With Hashem's help, the Amud Yomi part of it, we're going to begin when we actually start the Sefer, Torah Aleph. Right now, we're going to spend the next couple of days going through Nosson's Hakdamah. So we might do a little bit more because it's just the introduction, and we'll be able to go a little bit more quickly. But before we begin the Hakdamah, I just wanted to read to you. You don't have this in front of you, but I just wanted to read it to you. Sorry. Maybe if everybody could just move over. There's another chair in the back, and there's more space. Shkoyach. I just wanted to read to you a few sichas from Rabbi Nachman's Chus Yagen Aleinu, which are printed in Likutei Moharan, which is a collection of the biographical, anecdotal information around Rabbi Nachman and his life, including many of his sayings on various topics. It's a fascinating sefer, perhaps one of the most fascinating of all the Breslov Svarim is Likutei Moharan, the morning with its almost biographical sketch of Rabbi Nachman's life and telling all the stories about his travels and where he went. And there's a whole chapter on his travels to Eretz Yisrael, which is a remarkable story in and of itself and everything that happened over the course of that journey. So there's a part of Likutei Moharan, which they print in many editions of Likutei Moharan at the back, that's called Sichas Mimalas Teirasa Usfarav Aktoshim. Sichas, sayings, conversations that Rabbi Nachman expressed regarding the greatness of his Torah and of his Sfarim. So I'm just going to read to you a few. If you have time, you're welcome to go through the rest of it. It's quite lengthy, and the things that he says here are not to be believed. And Matzah Shabbos, for those who were there, my whole plan was literally to get up and just to read to you what I'm going to read to you now. I had to pivot a little bit, maybe in Yavin, but we will start reading a few of these now. So again, you don't have these inside, but just to listen for just a few minutes, I'm going to run through some of these, just to let us know what we're committing to, what we're opening ourselves up to, what a privilege we have to be sitting in this room. I can't even tell you. It's impossible for me to communicate it to you. You'll come to know, Be'ezer Hashem, if you stick with us, you'll see it yourself. I know, because this Sefer Likutei Moharan changed my life. This Sefer didn't look like this when I bought it. They're like, people want to know where you find like Svarim stores that make it look like you learned the Sefer. Baruch Hashem, it was a fresh Sefer, 12 years ago now, pretty much, and I'm a different human being. It changed every single aspect of my life, and so I know, Baruch Hashem, the little tiny bit that I know, if you stick with it, Gan Eden Elyon in this world. Anything more that I say will take away. Let's hear Rabbi Nachman himself. So the tzaddik says, Amar HaSefer HaKadosh Shaloi Likutei Moharan. This is Reb Nosson, who is Rabbi Nachman's primary disciple. We'll speak about in a minute in terms of all the svarim that Reb Nosson wrote based on Likutei Moharan, which we'll get to in a second. Rabbi Nachman said that his Sefer Likutei Moharan was Chalta de Geula. It's the beginning of the redemption. Amar, and he said, after my sefer has been published, I want very much that people should learn the sefer. A person needs to learn the sefer very much until he knows the whole thing. There's another sicha that Rabbi Nachman says that there's nobody who understands Likutei Moharan unless he could say every single lesson backwards and forwards. And the implication of that is that the whole Likutei Moharan is one organism, as we're going to see, which is very beautiful. Most people spend like months and months, like we're doing some of the chevra, on one lesson. But really, to understand that one lesson, be'emes, even though each one minei ubei, you can learn it in and of itself, is to see the whole sefer as a breathing algorithm, an organism. As we're going to see, it's very difficult for me to communicate this until you actually see the sefer, which is unparalleled. It's unparalleled in its style, in its depth, in its breadth, as we're going to see from Nosson's Hakdamah. There's no sefer like this. It's ra'oi, I believe, having Baruch Hashem poked around a little bit that I've poked around in Sfarad over the last last decade plus. It's ra'oi not to be on a different shelf of the bookshelf, to be on a different bookshelf legamri. There is all of Torah literature, and then there's Likutei Moharan. And I know that sounds extreme, and again, everything Rabbi Nachman said sounded extreme until people actually started to check it out. Like, is there something unique about his Torah? And Reb Nosson was by many of the other tzaddikim, and he tasted much of the other tzaddikim's Torah until he came to Rabbi Nachman. He said, this is something else. And he devoted and committed his whole life to this tzaddik and to his Torah. So this is what the Rebbe says. You got to learn it, Bal Pekyu, Molei Musar, the Hisayr is Gadol Ma'oila Hashem Yisbarach. It's filled with guidance. It's filled with inspiration. Asher Ein Aroich Elav. That there is nothing quite like it in the world. Nothing. Ein Aroich Elav. Va'amar. And then Rabbi Nachman said, a person should have 2 sidarim a day in Rabbi Nachman's Svarim. Number 1, Shir Echad Pashat, just to learn simply, which is what we're going to be doing. To learn very quickly, that it should be fluent in our mouths. And then a person also has to have, yikes, Baruch Hashem, it should be the worst of our problems. We have no room in the room. Baruch Hashem. That it should be V'shir Echad L'limud B'iyun Gadol. It should be learned to be Iyun Ki Yesh Amkus Gadol V'nifra. Yeah, if everybody can sort of slide in a little bit. Good morning. Ki Yesh Amkus Gadol V'nifla V'svarav HaKadoshim Anira Ma'oid. He says there is incredible depth and wondrous Amkus in his Svarim that are holy and Noira'im Ma'oid Ad Ein Sof Ve'Ein Tachlis. There's no end, there's no limit. It's infinite. The Rebbe's Sefer, the Rebbe's Svarim. The next teaching says, Pamachas, one time Rabbi Nachman was encouraging somebody to learn his Sefer, that he brought these teachings down into the world for our generation. And he said, Shu mitzvah gedayla lilmad sifrei harbe. It's a big mitzvah to learn his Sefer. And I have experienced this again humbly, and it's all relative, so I don't have a moyach gadol. But I've experienced the way that my brain pashut changed. I was not a particularly intelligent kid. I wasn't not intelligent. My brain had a huge upgrade, I promise you, from this Sefer. It's a workout for the brain. They say it's brought in a Sefer that's called Shivchei Shel Tzadik, which is a fascinating compendium of sayings and opinions from across the spectrum of Gedolei Yisrael, Gedolei Lita, Gedolei Chasidus, Gedolei Svard, including the Ben Ish Chai, and much later on, all the different tzaddikim, what they said about Rabbi Nachman. Like, everybody had an opinion. Rabbi Nachman himself said in Chaim Ran, he said there's no middle way. He said you're either with me or you're against me. But there's nobody who doesn't have an opinion about Rabbi Nachman. And so some remarkable things that you wouldn't know otherwise that the tzaddikim were saying about this particular tzaddik. So it says over there that Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, before Shir, in the mirror, used to learn Likutei Moharan, and when he was asked why, he said because it opens up the brain. Opens up the brain. Rabbi Nachman's Torah is a journey. There's nothing like it. It is a journey, as we're going to see from the Hakdamah of Rabbi Nosson, into the inner chambers of Torah, where you enter into one room, and that room Rabbi Nosson is going to describe has a bunch of doors, and each door leads into another room, and that door has a few windows, and those windows open up, and a person has a workout in abstraction. It's very abstract kind of thinking. It's a very different way of learning Torah, as we're going to see. So Rabbi Nachman says, and again, I can vouch for this, my humble self. This happened to me. You can have a big brain. I don't have a big brain, again, I said relative to what I had. Right? I'm still working on it. But you can become a moyach gadol through this sefer. Machkimas pesi. You see that with the sefer. It can take a person where you're at, and it can expand your mind. Absolutely expand your mind. Because there's so much depth. I'll just read one more. There's so much here. I'll actually read two more, but the first one I'll just read you the first line. Amar, Rabbi Nachman said, Yechoylin lias nasa bal tshuva gamor aydelim sefer shalai. You can become a total Baal Tshuva, when all of us need to become absolute total Baal Tshuvas. I don't care what your background is, but all of us are constantly becoming Baal Tshuva. And the Rebbe says you can become a Baal Tshuva Gamor through learning the Sefer. I sat last night at a wedding in Stamford Hill, next to a very, very special, dear chaver and mentor of mine, Moshe Perlstein. I don't know if anybody knows from Heichal Abesht in Yerushalayim. We were talking about Likutei Moharan. He happens to be my cousin because we're both descendants from Shmuel Selisher, so we have a very special connection. Or Moshe is tzaddik, mamash tzaddik. And he's very close with the Richard Meyer Morgenstern. If anybody knows, the Richard Meyer is one of the big mashpiyim, mikubalim, one of the Gedolei Hadar. And he told me, when we were speaking about learning, Likutei Moharan, Amar Yomi, he told me that at a certain point, he had a big birthday coming up, one of the bigger birthdays, and he went into Rebbe Meyer, and he asked him, "What's the avodah?" It's coming up a big birthday, whatever it was. He was turning, I don't know exactly which decade it was, but probably a significant decade. And Rebbe Meyer told him, "Tshuva. The avodah is tshuva. Reaching this point in your life, you look back, the avodah is tshuva." So he asked Rebbe Meyer in Yiddish, and how does a person do tshuva? He said, "Learn Likutei Moharan." That's tshuva. He said a year passed and it came Elul. He went in and he said, "Rebbe, what's the avodah?" He said, "Tshuva." He said, "And how does somebody do tshuva?" Learn Likutei Moharan. Likutei Moharan is tshuva, Baal Tshuva Gamor, because it takes anivos to learn this sefer. All of us have ideological obstacles to learning this sefer. We have all these ideas of what Breslov is, and what Breslov isn't. Somebody wanted to make sure he was going to get up this morning. Baruch Hashem, right? So we have all these different blockages, and it's mamish shtuyot. And I'll tell you why it's shtuyot, because I'm going to read to you the next piece, and with this we'll finish and we'll start the Hakdamah. Amar habal davar yachal lechapois ulechasos es ha'inayim ma'oid. The Yetzer Hara, the Satan, is able to blind people. It is able to blind people. How do I know? Because he says, if the Yetzer Hara wouldn't be blinding people in one way or another, this sefer would wake up the whole Klal Yisrael. The only reason that every single Yid isn't learning Likutei Moharan every day is because of the Satan. If the Satan wouldn't blind our eyes, I promise you, this entire nation would be back, would be activated, would be doing what they need to do to wake up all of humanity. It's not a question to me. I know that because I see this firsthand. I've been doing this for 10 years. First of all, it changed my life. Every single individual that I learned this with, if we learn it properly and the person's committed and they stick with it, it's not even to be believed. This thing works. It's shocking, the degree of efficacy and the way that this impacts people. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. Why isn't the whole world burnt on the Rebbe? Because the Satan's very, very, very powerful. Very powerful. So Ashreinu, I'm just telling you, the fact that we're in this room, you don't know what Schus Avos, I promise you, you have to have that you're here. Your Babbas and Zaydas cried over their Shabbos candles for this. I know I'm sounding very dramatic. The only reason I'm allowing myself to speak this way is because hopefully you're here, not just for one day, and you'll stick with it, and you'll see it yourself. So I feel comfortable saying this because it's provable. It's provable. It's demonstrable That's what everything Rabbi Nachman said about himself. Any Baal Dimyan could say about themselves, like Rabbi Nachman is Yadua, he was mispar, and he said, Ani ish pele, I'm a wonder of an ishmasi pele gadol. My soul is a great wonder. He said, Ani nahar amitaher mikol aksamim. He said, I'm a river that cleanses from all stains. He said, Chidish kamayni lo haya me'olam. If everybody could mute on the chat, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. Chidish kamayni lo haya me'olam. There was never a novelty like me. And says Reb Nosson, in Sichas Ran, what was he doing? Like, what? Anybody could say that about themselves. Says Reb Nosson, the difference with the Rebbe is that all of his milas and the levels that he claimed to have reached, said Reb Nosson, is mevur heitiv b'sfar v'akdosha, because you can see it. Again, the proof is literally in the pudding. Okay, so a little bit now, taking a step back after we've seen a little bit about the Sefer itself that we're going to be learning, Be'ezras Hashem. Just wanted to give you just a little bit more context, very, very, very briefly. And the context is as follows. Likutei Moharan is one singular Sefer, and this is the Sefer, it looks like this, but there are two parts to the Sefer. The first part is called Likutei Moharan Kama, and if you look on the top of the page, it just says nothing other than Likutei Moharan. And then, a much smaller section is called, like in the back, is called Likutei Moharan Tinyana. If you look at the top, you can see the word Tinyana. Tinyana means second, right? So there's Kama is the first Likutei Moharan, and then there's Likutei Moharan Tinyana. Both of these Sfarim were written by, I think everybody else should move in here, and we should move in there, maybe. It's definitely raw, Rabbi Nachman should have the base measures. But, so soon, as you said, good morning. So, every word in the Sefer was written by... No, I'm sorry. Every word in the Sefer is Rabbi Nachman's teaching. And it was all looked over by the Rebbe. But a large majority of the Sefer was not written by Rabbi Nachman himself. It was written by Rabbi Nosson, who was Rabbi Nachman's primary Talmud, which was his Yartzeit last week. And Rabbi Nosson was called by Rabbi Nachman, he called him Ma Yehoshua. Right, which meant to say that just like Moshe Rabbeinu had Yeshua, who reflected all of his teachings, I think Gemara Bava Basra says that Pnei Moshe Pnei Chama, right? Moshe's face was like the face of the sun. Pnei Yeshua Pnei Levana, meaning that he had no light of his own other than wasn't just a Talmud. He was the Talmud, and the Arizal had Rav Chaim Vital, and the Baal Shem Tov had the Magen Mizrich, Rav Yaakov Yosef of Polonia. All the tzaddikim, the Gra had Rav Chaim of Volozhin. All the great tzaddikim had a disciple that was reflecting their teachings and bringing them to the world. So most of it was written by Rabbi Nosson, who was the scribe of Rabbi Nachman, and that's why his Yartzeit is the Yartzeit of Ezra HaSofer, right? Because they're very, very connected. Ezra HaSofer brought Torah back to Am Yisrael through his writing. So did Reb Nosson, which is a fascinating thing.
Nosson was a descendant.
No, not a descendant. His Yartzeit, Asar B'Teves, is the Yartzeit of Ezra HaSofer, and he himself pointed that out right before he was nifter. This connection. It's very, very deep. There's something... Anyway, without getting into all that now, let's stay focused as much as we can. So most of the Sefers are Nosson's writing, and the difference between many of the early Hasidic Sfarim that were also written by the Talmidim is that you don't quite know whether they understood that, the teachings of the Tzaddik. I mean, you're assuming that they're transmitting it faithfully. In Breslov, it's different, because every single word in Likutei Moharan that Reb Nosson wrote, he brought it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe overlooked it and approved it. And Reb Nosson said every single time, almost without exception, but there was one time that Reb Nosson said, Rabbi Nachman said, Lo tafasta, he didn't really understand it completely. Rabbi Nachman said, Mamish, this is what I said. And so everything was looked over by the Rebbe and approved. The reason that there are two Sfarim is that Likutei Moharan Kama was printed, and it was the only time that it was printed this way, was printed as a standalone Sefer during Rabbi Nachman's life. And Tinyana, which had been being prepared for publication, was only printed a year or two after Rabbi Nachman left the world. In all subsequent editions, they're printed together. My father, Shlita, actually owns, that's like the first thing I do whenever I go to his house, I run to the cabinet and I take it out. He owns the second edition, which is essentially the first edition, Likutei Moharan, that was printed by Rebbe Nosson in his own house. He had an illegal printing press in his basement where he was printing Likutei Moharan, where already then you see the two volumes are printed together. And so my father owns like a real printing, and sometimes there are problems in the girsais, right? In Torah Yud, for example, we don't know if the word says lebal or levatel, and so like I can look it up because I have the original. My father has the original, which is really, really amazing to hold something that it came from Reb Nosson, like his own hand. It's an amazing thing. And then outside of the majority of the Sfarim, of the lessons that were written by Reb Nosson and then checked over by Rabbi Nachman, there's a handful of teachings, more than a handful. There's a category of teachings, but it's very, very, very minimal. It begins with the heading Lashon Rabbeinu, and that was written by Rabbi Nachman himself. And that was written mamish out of Rabbi Nachman's notebook. Yeah, that was Rabbi Nachman's own writing. And the Rebbe said that on those teachings, you could be medayik like a pasuk in the Torah. Kach hu amar. Ad kadei kach. Rasha tevis, Seifet tevis, gematrias, numbers of letters. Everything was bidiyuk, and that's true about all the teachings, but particularly Lashon Rabbeinu. You have to be very careful. You have to be medayik, like he invested awesome levels of Kedusha and Ruach HaKodesh into it.
That's within the Likutei Moharan.
That's within Likutei Moharan, as you're going to see. Torah Vav is Lashon Rabbeinu. I'm not sure of Torah Vav actually, but we'll see as we go. I just turned to one, right? So this is Torah Tezayin, and it says over here, you'll see at the top, right? Lashon Rabbeinu. Lashon Rabbeinu is Rabbi Nachman's own writing, but all of the teachings are from Rabbi Nachman, and some were written by Reb Nosson. So now, if you can take the Hakdamah. Before we begin the Hakdamah, just again briefly, I had to give just a day of Hakdamah before actually jumping into the Hakdamah. So this is the Hakdamah to the Hakdamah. I just want to read to you a few lines from the three primary Haskamas that Rabbi Nachman received on the Sefer. Most people don't know this. They think Likutei Moharan came from Rabbi Nachman, but they don't even ask about the Haskamas, like where to come from. Rabbi Nachman, just to focus us, was Nifter 38, 39. It's a machlekes. He started his Chasidus at 13 years old. He was a great grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. He lived in 1740. That was 1770. I keep on messing up the dates over here, but he lived until 1810. And so that's just to focus you in history where he was. And he started already teaching at 13 years old. He started to reveal himself. Reb Nosson came only at the last few years of Rabbi Nachman's life, and whatever teachings are in Likutei Moharan, that's also a very important thing, is what Rabbi Nachman wanted to be included after he came back from Eretz Yisrael, which was the last couple of years. He said after he came back, all the other Torah he didn't want printed. This was Eretz Yisrael Dika Torah that came from a higher place. Rabbi Nachman took a journey to Eretz Yisrael. It took him 6 months to get to Haifa, 6 months by boat to travel through Istanbul, and the stories are not normal. What went on there and what obstacles he had to put up with. He had the whole world working against him. He still does. I promise you, he still does. And Rabbi Nachman got to Haifa. He took 4 steps, walked Daled Amos. He said, Gamarti, turned around. He said, I got what I came for, going back home. And his student said, not so fast. He said, we were on that boat for 6 months. I ain't getting back on that boat so quickly. And they ended up spending 6 months in Eretz Yisrael. They went to Yerushalayim, they went to Tveria, they went to Tzfas. The Breslovers have a Messiah of where Rabbi Nachman was, what shuls he davened in. You could even go in Tzfas. There's a plaque outside of his shul. It says here, we know that Rabbi Nachman davened because everything is recorded. And they say that there's a Sikha in Chai Moharan. Rabbi Nachman was speaking about the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael as they were walking, and he pointed to a certain locale, he pointed to a certain valley, and he said over there, he said, you think I'm talking about Eretz Yisrael, like in the upper, he says, no, I mean with these stones, with these houses, this Eretz Yisrael, not some higher, spiritual place. Mamash Eretz Yisrael, they say that that's where Maharash, Rav Shik, who was a big Breslov Mashpia, chose to found his community in Yavniel. They said that's where Rabbi Nachman pointed. Like that's Eretz Yisrael. So that's where they plopped down their community. Yavniel, it's a big Breslov community. So everything in Likutei Moharan is just the tiny percentage of Rabbi Nachman's teachings that are Eretz Yisrael teachings. Rabbi Nosson couldn't hold himself back, and he slipped into the middle of Likutei Moharan a few teachings from before Eretz Yisrael, which we're going to get to, and you can see the difference. You can see the difference. It's mamish. They're some of the most difficult and Very, very difficult teachings, very cryptic teachings. Partially, it has to do with the fact that those were not written down by Reb Nosson. Those are called, and those begin, as you're going to see, with the heading Lashon Chaverim. Those were not written by Reb Nosson. Reb Nosson had the gift of transmission. The other tzaddikim that were there, and there were great tzaddikim. Rabbi Nachman had sitting by him a person in his 70s. He was 13 years old. He had sitting by him Rabbi Aaron, the Rav of Breslov, the Rav of the whole city, was a chassid of this little kid. Mamish sat by his feet. Rabbi Aaron the Rav, one of the primary disciples, Rabbi Naftali, Rabbi Nosson. He had gedolim sitting with him, and so that's just laying it out. But he had askamas. He had 5 askamas. I'm just going to read you 3 of them. And Rabbi Nosson says there were many more that Rabbi Nachman didn't want to print because of anivos. The 3 askamas. Get ready for this. If anybody knows, it's like shocking to know this. People don't know this. The 3 askamas Rabbi Nachman has, the primary askamas, are from the Chayzim Lublin. Chayzim Lublin wrote a askama on Likutei Moharan. Most people don't know this. The second one, maybe even more to those who know, but he's a little bit more hidden, is the Kashnitzer Magid, Kashnitzer, Avodas Yisrael, and the Zlotchever Magid. 3 of them primary Gedoyle Ga'oinei Chasidus are writing askamas. So I just want to read you from each of their askamas, just 2 lines. From the Chayzeh, this is how he refers to this young tzaddik. Hama'ar HaGadol, the great light, Ish Kadosh, the holy person, Moifis Hadar, the wonder of the generation, Ner Yisrael, the candle of Am Yisrael, Patish and Chazak, the strong hammer, Amad Hayamini, the right side, the pillar of the right. That's what the Chayzim Lublin says, and he says, I don't need to give askam on this sefer. You know why? And so what I said, Ki advarim me'aleihem yi'idun v'yagidun. Anybody who opens it up will see that there's never been Torah like this. You don't need my askama. Devar emes la'amitai. These are the truest of true words. Lefi niyana v'divrei lekim chayim. That's from the Chayzim Lublin. The Kashitzer Magid called him Hama'ar HaGadol, the great light. Baran Shal Kadosh makes reference to the fact that he's a descendant from the Baal Shem Tov on one side, Reb Nachman Haradenker on the other side, Moifis Hadar, and he says, Re'isi Bahem, I saw in the Sefer Dvarim Arevim, sweet words, Ni'imim, pleasant words, V'chidudim Amukim Ma'oid, very deep, sharp words, Ishlefi Erkoin, that's very important. Each person in accordance with their level. You have the greatest Mekubalim trying to decipher what Rebbe Nachman was speaking about, and at the same time, the simplest, most regular person is able to open it up and get straight chizuk and advice, as I'm going to demonstrate in a minute. From that, he says, how honorable and wondrous is the day asher yatsa la'ar devarim ke'elu, that these words are coming to light, asher lahem dum yasihila. That the only thing you can do is be silent to praise them, because they're beyond. And finally, we have from the Zlotchever Magid, he calls him Harav HaGadol, the great Rav, Butzina Kadisha, the holy light, Moifis Hadar, wonder of the generation, Ner Yisrael, Patish Chazak. Okay, you might have seen the Chazim Lublin's thing, it was so original, okay? Kedushas Shemai, the holiness of his name, Nachman Neirei Yair. The last thing I'll say before actually beginning the Hakdamah is that Likutei Moharan is just the foundation of the entire Breslov or corpus or over. Based on Likutei Moharan, Reb Nosson, who was the moon to transmit the light of Rabbi Nachman, that today in the Breslover world, they know that it's even more important, they say, to learn the writings of Reb Nosson than Rabbi Nachman. Because from Reb Nosson, that's where you really get into it. But humbly, you have to do Likutei Moharan before you do that, because it's very difficult to really learn Likutei Halachos without that. There are 4 principal Sfarim that Reb Nosson himself wrote, based on the teachings in Likutei Moharan. The very first of these Sfarim, which is, in my humble opinion, probably the most important from the standpoint of Avodah, is a sefer called Likutei Tfilos. Reb Nosson took every single teaching in Likutei Moharan based on a teaching that Rabbi Nachman revealed, and he took a Torah, and he immediately after writing down and recording the Torah, he turned it into a prayer. There's only one other sefer in Yiddishkeit that has this, and that's the Torah, right? Because Tehillim, as it says in the beginning of Medrash Tehillim, is 5 Sfarim Keneged Chamishi Chumshei Torah. David HaMelech, Daven Up Sefer Tehillim, which Reb Nosson deals with at Ba'orich in Likutei Halachos Rosh Chodesh, which we learn with some of the people. So this is an incredible sefer to get. You can download it free online, have it on your phone. We're not going to be doing this in the group, But imagine if we're going to be able, because with 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, we're going to be up to Torah Beis or Gimel. It's incredible. People spend months and months on a Torah. We're going to be able to see the makif. Later in the day, if you can find the time, you have the PDF on your phone, you flip to Torah Gimel and you daven it. Because it's not about the learning. Rabbi Nachman didn't just want you to learn. It wasn't about like we have a chiv to learn. It was an avodah. An avodah, you bring Hashem into your life to daven it. I want to reach these madrigas. I'm not stop reading a sefer. I want to live this. I want to really live this. That's Likutei Tfilas, hundreds and hundreds of tfilas on every single Torah in Likutei Moharan and some of the sichos as well.
How many Torahs are there, by the way?
411 in all, the whole sefer. Okay, that's Likutei Tfilas. This sefer is called Kitzur Likutei Moharan, which I do not recommend. I think people make a big mistake when they say, "Oh, Likutei Moharan I can't do, so I'm going to learn Kitzur Likutei Moharan." Kitzur Likutei Moharan is for review. It's not meant to be learned. It is not a substitute for Likutei Moharan. If a person only learns Kitzur Likutei Moharan, they will not be able to understand the Rebbe. And I know that because that was my mistake. I started with Kitzur Likutei Moharan. I couldn't make heads or tails out of it. It's for review. But Reb Nosson took every Torah in the sefer. It's not much of a kitzur, but he's a mikatzer, and sometimes learning kitzur Likutei Moharan can enable you to understand how Reb Nosson understood, because there's Shinoi Lashon, and he explains things. It's almost like, in a sense, a little bit of a pirush. You should know, by the way, parenthetically, that Breslov Hasidim learn Likutei Tfilas. They have 2 starim in Likutei Tfilas. One is to say the tefillah, and the second is to learn it. Because through Reb Nosson's a transmission of the Torah and Likutei Moharan into prayer form, you can see over there also how he learned the Torah. And they mamish learn it. They learn Likutei Tfilas. The next is called Likutei Eitzes. Reb Nosson went through the whole entire Likutei Moharan, and he brought out all of the practical advice. So small little teachings. And this was translated by Breslov Research Institute, which translated all of these Sfarim, by the way, in the book called Advice. If you ever saw Advice, that's Likutei Eitzes. And he split it not by Torah, but he split it under headings. So Machlokes and Meriva, the person wants to know everything Rabbi Nachman said. Practical advice out of Likutei Moharan for Machlokes. The whole thing is full of advice. Mama no Parnasa, that's a good one, right? Everything Rabbi Nachman says about practical advice, how to bring Mama and Parnasa into a person's life. That's Likutei Eitzes, but undoubtedly the most important of all of the Sfarim, in a certain sense, meaning Likutei Tfilas is Mamash Avodah, but in terms of Rabbi Nosson's main work, was Likutei Halachas. This is 1 volume out of 8 volumes, which spans the entire Dalet Chalkei Shulchan Aruch. Reb Nosson was a Goyin Adir. Reb Nosson himself was a son-in-law of Reb David Tzvi Orbach, who was one of the Gedolei Lita, one of the Gedolei Adar. It wasn't exactly Lita, but not Hasidish, so to speak. And he took Reb Nosson as a son-in-law. The man they call him in Breslov Reb Nosson Go'inu Zeinu. He was our genius. He was a Goyin. And Reb Nosson went through in this project Dalet Chalkei Shulchan Aruch 7 times in his life, 8 times, and every time he treats and approaches another area of halacha, whether it's Mamish and Orach Chaim, Hilchos Tefillin, Hilchos Tzitzis, Hilchos Mincha, Hilchos Rosh Chodesh, or whether it's in Choshen Mishpat, Mamish, Mekach Memkar, Hilchos Eidos, Hilchos, Kinyanim, whatever halacha it is in every area, Even Ezer, all the different areas of Hilchos Gittin, Hilchos, Kedushin, all the different areas of halacha, Kilei Behema, Mamish, the whole thing. Shluch HaKein, Gewalt, right? Shluch HaKein is some of the most famous teachings of Reb Nosson from Shluch HaKein. Hilchos Arev, Hilchos Mamish, the whole Likutei Halachah, the whole Shulchan Aruch. And Reb Nosson, as he was learning it, I don't know how this Kadosh Baruch Hu gave him Siyata D'Shmaya, to be able to intuit, to feel which Torah in Likutei Moharan, even though it might look like it has no connection at all with that area of halacha, is not only connected, but is actually the neshama of that whole sugya in halacha. So, for example, for the chaver that are learning in the evening kollel that we have, Likutei Moharan Be'iyun, if you want to join, speak to me afterwards. Very, very special, where we do Be'iyun. So a lot of the chaver, I just saw them a couple hours ago because we ended our day, went shluf, had a little nap, and came back. Ashreinu, so they know. You chaver know already, right? But we're learning over here now. Hilchos Kilei Behema. Right, the climb of loisachsam, not loisachsam, but not to be loisachar, right, together. And Reb Nosson sees Kilei Behema as a perfect expression for Rabbi Nachman's Chanukah Torah. right? And all of the teachings that Rabbi Nachman brings, and it's there's no words for it. There's no words for it. I sat last night with Rabbi Carson, who I learned with. Sorry, call him out. I blew his cover now. We just sat there looking at each other. Mazeh. How does the world not know? When Rabbi Nosson started to hear Rabbi Nachman's revelations, he started running out into the streets of Breslov, screaming, "Do you people know? Are you blind?" Rabbi Nachman ran after him and he held him tight. He said, "No, this is not how it's going to go. Slow, slow, slow." Sometimes I feel like Rabbi Nachman's holding me back also because I want to bring this to the whole world. Because this is a thing that works. This is a thing that works. Everybody's kvetching and complaining and everybody has problems. We have a solution. You're going to experience that Be'ezras Hashem. Amkus Nifla, you don't need proofs to God's existence. You see God. You don't need a proof. It's there. You see it. You see it. You taste it. Tamu Uru'u Kitayv Hashem. So that's Likutei Halachos, and you can just see over here the way it looks. Just flowing drashas. Flowing, Baruch Hashem, B'tzeicha, to learn much of Likutei Halachos, Baruch Hashem, over the years, and Rabbi Nosson said that the Shlach Kaddish said that his sefer is Me'ein Olam Haba. Rabbi Nosson said my sefer is Olam Haba Mamish. Now again, so they're saying all these things, but so prove it, and they proved it. They proved it. Let's begin the Hakdamah. Okay, Be'ezras Hashem. But again, I'm allowed to do this because the shiur is going to go so fast and so bekias that at least I need just a minute before we jump into it to catch our breath. Let's take a look at the beginning of Rabbi Nosson's Hakdamah after everything that I've said, which I hope has been helpful so far. Ashreinu, Ashreinu. It says the Heilig Rabbi Nosson's Chus Yagon Aleinu. Hadar atam re'u dvar Hashem b'pasuk Yirmiyahu. This generation has seen the word of God. It says Rabbi Nosson Shimulay Nemar. It doesn't say that they heard, which is like on a lower level. Ela re'u. They saw. Says Rabbi Nosson, re'u. My dear reader, see. Ki Hashem Nosson lechem matmoin. Hashem has given you a gift. Devarim ha'oimdim b'ruma shel olam. He's revealed teachings that stand at the Ruma Shel Olam. And if you remember, what does Chazal say about Ruma Shel Olam? Tefillah. That's a very interesting thing that he's applying Ruma Shel Olam to this, because Rabbi Nachman's Torahs are prayerful Torahs, right? They're Dveikus Torahs. They're Hashem. They're interactive with Hashem, relational Torahs. Ruma Shel Olam. K'mayim Rabbi Sinus Chana Levracha v'Lamachasa Asik. Coverings of ancient coverings. Says the Gemara, these are referring to people who cover over, or dvarim, the matters, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu covered over, like things that are concealed. But the Ikeda Amri, there's also a Maimer in that Gemara that says, no, this is a reference, Lamachasa Asik, to the person who reveals the things that Lamachasa that were covered over by Atik, by Hashem. Says Rav Nosson, both are true about this sefer. Both are true about this holy sefer. It's a sefer that reveals, and at the same time it's a sefer that covers. It's revealing and explaining lofty, elevated, secret matters, chidushim, chadashim, brand new, novel ideas, v'hakdamah yikaros, and precious introductions. Rabbi Nachman said, my whole sefer is only hakdamas. Hakdamas. And once you learn Likutei Halachos, you understand what he meant. People learn Likutei Moharan, you think that that's what he said. Rabbi Nachman in each Torah is just opening a door. Then you enter in. Rabbi Nachman said, and that's one of the things that I was going to read to you, Rabbi Nachman said that you can pass through the whole Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh through the lens of every single Torah that he revealed. Meaning, you can take Torah Aleph and you can do the whole Yiddishkeit with Torah Aleph. V'haraya, Ada knows, there's a sefer called Nachas HaShulchan, right? By Rav Alter Tepliker. And Nachas HaShulchan, just to demonstrate this, Rabbi Alter Tepliker took Torah Aleph, which we're going to learn together, Be'ezras Hashem, in the next few days, the first teaching, and he went through the whole Shulchan Aruch, and showing how this one teaching illuminates the panemius of every single area of halacha in Shulchan Aruch. That's one teaching. One teaching. He played other games because he has another sefer called Yakar de Shabbata, right, where he shows how every single Torah in Likutei Moharan is talking about Shabbos. And he has a sefer called, what's the Eretz Yisrael, what? Zimras Haaretz, where he shows how every single Torah in Likutei Moharan is illuminating the inyan of Eretz Yisrael. There's no sefer like this, Chevra. There's no sefer. Ein davar kazeh. Giluyim, 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 giluyim. Eitzas merachai. distant pieces of advice, just the last few minutes. Emunah Oymen, or so to say, Emunah Oymen, the work of Oymen, of a master craftsman. That flow forth from the source of living waters, that flow forth from an incredibly elevated and exalted and lofty source. This incredible angel, Allah Chacham, rose up into Shemayim. And he brought down he brought down Torah through so many different strategies and different methods, bringing them down from the higher ideas down into lower ideas, and mishalim, and making sure we understand it, and bringing it into Rashi Tevis and Sefer Tevis and psukim and explanations, miseichel elyon l'seichel tachton, from the higher wisdom to the lower wisdom, adash and eslabsh b'levushin elu b'chalukah d'Rabbanan, until it came into this form. The Rabbi Nachman said, I could not bring these ideas any lower. He said, Likutei Moharan is the lowest form I could possibly bring these ideas, because they didn't start with Likutei Moharan. They started as hasagas from another world, from Aliyas Neshama. Rabbi Nachman explains in Chaim Moran how he was given money like tokens in Shemayim, and he was given an ability to spend them at the higher world. And one of the Torahs, I'm forgetting now which one, he purchased it from a certain kat of malachim, like not normal stuff, not normal things, but it's not this worldly, otherworldly coming down. But there are tzachos v'nois in a very sweet and pleasant way, and in discourses that are sweet and wondrous and precious to the palate. We'll just finish the sentence. But there are chachma, in a way of wisdom, v'tam and taste, upilpul usvara, there are chayim techachas musar haskell, that has everything in it, habayar ka'esh, that burns like a fire ad lev hashamayim, to the essence of the heavens. Ashreinu Yidden, what a privilege that we're taking this journey, a daily journey. It's not even to be believed. Mamish, we have what to say Maidim about now in Shacharis. What a privilege to take this journey. I do hope that you'll join us and stick with us. Thank you to everybody who is joining us. Unbelievable. Thank you, Chevra.
Melech Chai V'Kayam Al Kol Neshima She'ani Nosson.